My name is Angela J. Watson. I was 22 when my parents threw me out in the rain. And I am writing this now because people keep asking how I went from sleeping in a shelter to owning a cybersecurity firm and a house I paid for in cash. I have rewritten this story more times than I can count. Not because I do not know what happened, but because every version sounded like I wanted sympathy. I do not. Sympathy would not have saved me that night. Evidence did. 4 years ago, I was still living with my parents. Not because I wanted to stay dependent forever. I was finishing cybersecurity certifications, working part-time, taking small contract jobs, and saving every dollar I could. My father, Corbin Watson, ran a chain of private physiotherapy clinics across the region. My mother, Lenora, managed the family's rental properties. From the outside, we looked polished, comfortable, respectable. Inside that house, there was a throne, and I was never sitting on it. My younger brother, Maddox, was 3 years younger than me, but my parents treated him like the chosen heir from the day he learned to smile. Everything was Maddox's future, Maddox's potential, Maddox's inheritance. I was the utility daughter, useful when a laptop froze, when paperwork needed sorting, when someone needed a quiet person to blame. Invisible the rest of the time. The only person who ever saw me clearly was my grandfather, Aldrich. He was not warm in a soft way, but he was steady. He noticed when I studied late. He asked about my certifications. More than once, he told me privately that his will would take care of me, that I would not have to depend on Corbin or Lenora once the estate was settled. Then Aldrich died, and when the will was read, I got nothing. Everything went to my father. I questioned it once, just once, at the kitchen table about 2 weeks after the funeral. My voice was careful, because grief had made the whole house feel breakable. Grandpa told me he set something aside for me. Did something change? Corbin put down his fork like I had insulted him. Your grandfather left his estate to the people he trusted to manage it. That should tell you everything. Lenora did not even look up from her plate. I let it go because I was 20, grieving, and too young to understand that silence can be expensive. I buried the doubt and kept my head down. 2 years later, on a Tuesday night in October, they called me downstairs after dinner. Maddox was already in the living room, leaning back with that half-smile he wore when he knew a joke was about to happen at someone else's expense. Corbin stood near the front door. Lenora sat on the arm of the couch. My suitcase was in the hallway, already packed. We've made a decision, Corbin said. You're 22. It's time for you to figure things out on your own. Your room is being reassigned to Maddox. He needs a proper office space. No warning, no conversation, no chance to prepare. I looked at my mother. She said, We've invested enough in you, Angela. It's time we focus on the child who actually has a future worth building, not a drizzle. A hard, cold downpour that soaked the driveway black. He tossed my suitcase onto the pavement like garbage. Across the street, the Wellmans were watching from their porch. Corbin turned toward them and said loudly, Our worthless daughter is finally getting what she deserves. Lenora laughed. Maddox stood in the doorway, arms folded, saying nothing. Something inside me shifted then. Not rage, something colder, heavier. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and lifted it high enough to catch Corbin's face, Lenora's grin, and Maddox's silhouette behind them. Then I said one sentence. Everything you own from this moment forward is living on borrowed time. Corbin laughed. Lenora waved me off. Maddox closed the door. I picked up my suitcase and walked to the nearest bus stop. That night I found a 24-hour diner 3 miles away, ordered one coffee, opened my laptop, and searched for attorneys who specialized in inheritance fraud and estate manipulation. Around midnight, Maddox texted me, Your room looks better as my office. I screenshotted it, saved it to cloud storage, opened a notes app, and typed 5 words. Day 1. They have no idea. The next morning, before the sun had fully climbed over the diner windows, I made 3 phone calls that changed the direction of my life. I was still wearing damp jeans from the night before. My suitcase sat beside the booth like a witness. The coffee in front of me had gone cold, but my hands were steady in a way that frightened me. I was not thinking like a daughter anymore. I was thinking like someone who had finally understood she was evidence walking around in human form. The first call was to Savannah Langford, an estate fraud attorney whose name I found at 2 in the morning while searching legal directories between sips of burned coffee. Her profile said she had handled forged wills, manipulated trusts, and financial abuse inside powerful families. She was far beyond what I could afford, but her website mentioned contingency arrangements for strong cases, so I called anyway. She answered on the third ring. I gave her the short version. Grandfather died. Will left everything to my father. Grandfather had promised me something different. Parents threw me out after I asked too many quiet questions. Savannah did not comfort me. She asked, "Do you have anything in writing from your grandfather that contradicts the filed will?" I did not. I told her about the conversations, about Aldrich showing me draft documents in his study, about the way he used to tap the folder and say, "Angela, you will not have to ask them for anything." Savannah was silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "Conversations are not evidence, but forged documents leave fingerprints. Let me make some calls." The second call was to Rowan Tate, my boyfriend. We had been together quietly for almost a year, mostly because I had not wanted my family digging their claws into something good. Rowan worked as a brewer at a craft brewery 20 minutes outside the city. He was the kind of man who did not ask for a performance before offering help. When I told him what happened, he went silent for one breath, then said, "I have a spare key. My couch is yours. Come now." That couch kept me alive for the first few weeks. I did spend 3 nights in a shelter before I could get to him properly, and I will never romanticize that. The fluorescent lights, the locked bag under my arm, the fear of closing my eyes too deeply. But after that, Rowan gave me space without pity. He made coffee, left clean towels outside the bathroom, and never once said, "At least they're still your parents." The third call came through Savannah. His name was Callum Ware, a private investigator and former law enforcement officer, built like a man, who had spent 30 years expecting people to lie. Callum did not care about my feelings. He cared about signatures, dates, account trails, and property records. I respected that immediately. Within 2 weeks, he found the first crack. The notary who witnessed Aldrich's filed will had an expired license at the time of signing. That alone would not prove fraud, but it gave Savannah a place to push. Callum kept pulling. He ran Corbin's business filings, cross-checked rental property transfers, and found companies I had never heard of tied to my father's clinics. 3 LLCs had been created within a year of Aldrich's death. On paper, they looked like harmless holding companies. In reality, money from clinic profits and rental income had been routed through them. And the final beneficiary kept appearing again and again. Maddox, not the family, not the estate, Maddox. Savannah brought in a forensic accountant, and the deeper they dug, the worse it became. 2 rental properties Aldrich had once told me would be mine had been transferred into Maddox's name using signatures dated after Aldrich died. Someone had signed my dead grandfather's name and filed it with the county as if death were just a paperwork inconvenience. That was not favoritism. That was a felony. I remember sitting on Rowan's couch with the preliminary report open on my laptop, reading page after page of transfers, shell companies, fake signatures, and quiet theft. Rowan sat beside me, not touching me until I reached for his hand first. "They planned this," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then we plan better." During the day, I worked every cybersecurity contract I could find. Vulnerability assessments, network audits, small business security cleanups. At night, I fed every dollar into an account labeled legal fund. I slept 4 hours if I was lucky, sometimes less. I was exhausted, but exhaustion felt better than helplessness. 6 weeks in, Callum called late on a Thursday. His voice was flat, careful. "Angela," he said, "there's an offshore account connected to your father's clinics, and there's a second will." My whole body went still, One that was never filed, he continued. It's sitting in a safe deposit box your father doesn't know has been flagged. I called Savannah immediately. She listened, then went quiet long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Finally, she said, if that will says what I think it says, your father is not just looking at civil liability. He is looking at prison. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, because for the first time since Corbin threw my suitcase into the rain, I understood something clearly. They had not erased me. They had only given me time to learn how to come back sharper. The second will change everything. But Savannah warned me not to confuse leverage with victory. The worst mistake people make, she told me, is swinging the moment they find a weapon. You do not swing until the target is already off balance. So I did not swing. I waited. Callum got access to the safe deposit box through a sealed court order Savannah filed so quietly that Corbin never heard the floor cracking under him. Inside was Aldrich's original estate plan. Handwritten notes, signed drafts, proper notary stamps, and instructions so clear that even grief could not distort them. Aldrich had left Corbin a portion, yes, but he had also left me 2 rental properties, investment accounts, and a trust meant for my education and future business. None of it had ever reached me. Corbin had replaced with a version that funneled everything to himself, then redirected the benefits to Maddox through shell companies. The fake will had been filed. The real one had been hidden. When Savannah finished reading the documents, she removed her glasses and said, "Your father defrauded a dead man to rob his own daughter." I thought that sentence would make me cry. It did not. It made me still. We had enough to go straight to authorities, but Savannah advised against moving too early. Corbin had money, connections, and a lifetime of experience making himself look respectable. If we showed our hand, he could hide assets, destroy records, and bury us in legal mud for years. So instead we pushed pressure into places he would never connect to me. Anonymous tips went to the IRS about inconsistencies in the clinic filings. Every tip was backed by documentation. Within 2 months, an audit notice landed on Corbin's desk. Fraud alerts were filed with the banks holding the shell company accounts, making it harder for him to move money without scrutiny. Investors grew nervous. A silent partner pulled away. A medical equipment supplier shortened his credit line. Clinic contracts started expiring without renewal. Corbin's empire did not collapse all at once. It bled, slowly at first, then faster. Maddox, who had been handed a management position despite having no real qualifications, began panicking. Therapists left. Vendors complained. Patients noticed delays. Maddox blamed the front desk, the market, the staff, the software, even the weather. He blamed everyone except the father who had built his golden future on forged signatures. From the outside, I stayed gone. To them, I was probably still the daughter sleeping on couches, too proud to crawl back, too broken to matter. They had no idea I was working 12-hour days, taking cybersecurity contracts, running vulnerability assessments, auditing small business networks, and pouring every spare dollar into my legal fund. Rowan never let me forget to eat. Some nights he would set a plate beside my laptop and say, "Your revenge still needs calories." I incorporated my cybersecurity firm 9 months after they threw me out. A year later, I landed a regional hospital network as a client. That contract changed everything. It gave my company credibility, cash flow, and the kind of momentum Corbin could no longer fake in his own businesses. About 14 months in, Maddox called me, not to apologize, not to ask if I was alive. He wanted to know if I knew any tech people who could fix the clinic's website because it kept getting flagged for security vulnerabilities. I nearly laughed into the phone. "I'll ask around," I said. Then I hung up and never followed up. By month 30, Savannah laid it out on a conference call. Corbin's clinics were operating at a loss. 2 rental properties were in pre-foreclosure. Lenora's credit lines were maxed. Maddox had just applied for a business loan using Aldrich's name as collateral on a property he did not legally own. "That," Savannah said, "is a fresh felony." 3 weeks later, I closed on my house. Paid in full, no mortgage. 4 bedrooms, a home office, a quiet yard with old trees and morning light that made the floor look golden. I stood in the empty living room with the keys in my palm and felt nothing at first. Then I felt everything. I called Savannah. "How long before they find out and come asking?" "Weeks," she said. "Maybe less." She was right. So I installed cameras, not cheap ones. Legal grade surveillance, audio and video. Every room, every hallway, every entrance. The feeds streamed to my server, Savannah's office, and a secure portal investigators could access if needed. Rowan watched the technicians leave and asked, "You really think they'll come?" I looked around my house, my first real home, the one thing they had not been able to touch. "They threw me away when I had nothing," I said. "Now they'll come back because I have something." And when they did, I was going to let them talk. It took 5 weeks for them to come. 5 weeks after I moved into the house. 5 weeks after the security company finished installing cameras, so discreet, you would never notice them unless you knew exactly where to look. Every entrance, every hallway, every room that mattered. Legal-grade video, clear audio, time-stamped feeds streaming to 3 places at once. My encrypted server, Savannah's office, and the investigator portal. Savannah had asked me once if I thought that level of preparation was excessive. Then she paused and said, "Actually, no. You know them better than I do." I did. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen making lunch when a car pulled into my driveway, then another. Then I heard doors closing, voices low and familiar. I looked through the front window and saw Corbin, Lenora, and Maddox walking toward my front porch like they had rehearsed the entrance. Lenora was carrying a casserole dish. That detail still makes me laugh. She brought a casserole to a robbery. I let them knock. I dried my hands. I checked the camera feed once on my phone, then opened the door. Corbin smiled wider than I had seen in years. "Angela," he said warmly, as if he had not thrown my suitcase into the rain. "Look at this place. You've done well for yourself, sweetheart." "Sweetheart," I stepped aside and let them in. For 10 minutes, we played the game. Lenora set the casserole on my counter and commented on the tile. Corbin walked through the living room like he was estimating resale value. Maddox barely spoke, but his eyes moved constantly, measuring windows, doors, square footage, possibilities. "How's the business?" Corbin asked. "Good," I said. "This neighborhood is beautiful," Lenora added. "Very stable. Very family-oriented." Maddox finally said, "4 bedrooms?" I looked at him. "Yes." He nodded, like the answer confirmed something. I offered water. They sat on my couch. I sat across from them, calm enough that I almost frightened myself. I could feel the pitch coming the way you feel thunder before the sky breaks. Corbin began first. "Listen, Angela, we know things have been complicated." Complicated. That was one way to describe fraud, abandonment, and public humiliation. "But family is family," he continued. "And right now, the family is going through a difficult stretch. The clinics are struggling because of some unfair audits. Your mother's properties are tied up in tax nonsense. Maddox is trying to build a future, but he needs stability." He paused, waiting for me to offer help. I did not. Lenora leaned forward, eyes wet on command. "We would not ask if we were not desperate. We gave you everything growing up. Now we need you to remember where you came from." I looked at the woman who had laughed, while I stood in the rain and said nothing. Corbin reached into Maddox's bag and pulled out a folder. He opened it on my coffee table and spread out documents with seals, signatures, and notary blocks. Ownership transfer papers. According to those papers, my house had been purchased using funds from a Watson family trust, which meant the property legally belonged to the family estate. Corbin, as trustee, had the authority to reassign it. The reassignment would transfer the house to Maddox for family stability. Every word was fabricated. The trust did not exist. The account numbers were fiction. The signatures were lies dressed in expensive ink. Then the doorbell rang again. A woman stepped inside after Corbin waved her in. Mid-40s, neat blazer, leather folio, notary stamp in hand. "This is Darlene Voss," Corbin said. "She'll authenticate everything once you sign." I looked at Darlene. She avoided my eyes. Corbin pushed a pen across the table. "Sign the house over to Maddox. Don't make this ugly." Lenora's tears vanished. Her voice went flat. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have you declared mentally unstable. I know a psychiatrist who will sign the evaluation. We'll take the house through court if we have to." Maddox leaned forward. "Just sign it, Angela. You owe us this." I let the silence sit. Then I smiled. "Are you finished?" Corbin frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means every room in this house has been recording since the day I moved in. Audio and video. High definition. Right now, this footage is streaming live to my attorney, to state investigators, and to 3 encrypted cloud servers. Every threat, every forged document, every word you just said, all of it is captured. Nobody moved." I stood slowly, and that is a confirmed forgery on camera. A hard knock sounded at the front door. I opened it. 2 plainclothes detectives and a uniformed officer stood on my porch. One detective held up a folded warrant. "We're looking for Corbin Watson, Lenora Watson, Maddox Watson, and Darlene Voss." I stepped aside and pointed toward the living room. "They're all right here." What happened next took less than 15 minutes, but it ended the life my family had been pretending to live for years. Darlene Voss broke first. The moment the detectives stepped into my living room and identified themselves, she lifted both hands like the room had caught fire. "He paid me," she said, pointing straight at Corbin. "He said this 3 weeks ago. He gave me the documents. I only came to notarize them. He said it was a family matter." One detective collected the forged transfer papers from my coffee table with gloved hands and slid them into an evidence bag. Darlene was read her rights before she even finished crying. Maddox tried to stand taller, smoothing his jacket like he was about to give a business presentation instead of be arrested in the house he had just tried to steal. "I had no knowledge those documents were fraudulent," he said quickly. "My father told me this was a legitimate trust issue. I'm a victim here too." The detective did not blink. "Your signature appears on multiple forged instruments already under investigation." Maddox went white. Not angry white. Empty white. Like reality had finally reached him, and he had no language for it. He looked at me while they cuffed him, confused, almost offended that the universe had stopped protecting him. Corbin did not panic. He went rigid, jaw locked, eyes fixed on nothing. When the detective approached him, he said only, "I want my attorney." Then he held out his wrists like surrender was beneath him but unavoidable. Lenora was the one I remember most. She was told she was being detained for questioning related to the broader investigation, and suddenly the woman who had carried a casserole into my house like a peace offering turned on me with pure venom. "You're destroying this family," she said. "Everything your father built, everything we sacrificed, you're tearing it apart because you didn't get your way. You were always selfish. You were never worth the investment." For the first time in my life, her words did not enter me. I looked at her and said, "You destroyed this family 4 years ago." She opened her mouth, then stopped. Not because she felt guilt. Lenora did not do guilt. But, for 1 second, recognition crossed her face. She knew exactly which night I meant. Within 48 hours, search warrants hit my parents' home, Corbin's clinics, and Maddox's apartment. Investigators found the forged will, hidden accounts, shell company records, illegal property transfers, and financial trails Savannah's team had already mapped for years. Every quiet thread we had pulled became a rope around them. Maddox's wife, Felicity, filed for divorce almost immediately, saying through her attorney that she had no knowledge of the financial crimes and would cooperate fully. Relatives started calling. Some were furious. Some were scared. Aunt Rosalind, Aldrich's sister, called quietly and said, "I always knew something was wrong with that will. I just didn't know how to prove it." That night, I sat alone in my living room and opened the cloud folder holding the recording from the night they threw me out. Corbin's voice, Lenora's laugh. My suitcase hitting wet pavement. Maddox in the doorway, watching. I renamed the file Exhibit A. 2 weeks later, I walked into court with 4 years of evidence behind me. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. Darlene pleaded guilty first and testified that Corbin paid her cash to authenticate fabricated documents. The prosecution played the footage from my house, Corbin demanding I sign, Lenora threatening to have me declared mentally unstable, Maddox saying, "You owe us this." Then they played the rain video from 4 years earlier. The courtroom went silent when Corbin called me worthless, and Lenora laughed. At sentencing, the judge called it calculated cruelty carried out over years. Corbin received 7 years for inheritance, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and tax evasion. Lenora received 3 years for her role in concealing the fraud and participating in the financial crimes. Maddox received 18 months because he signed the documents, benefited knowingly, and still tried to take my home. The civil judgments finished what the criminal case started. Properties were sold. Accounts were frozen. Corbin and Lenora were declared bankrupt. I recovered Aldrich's intended inheritance, plus damages. The money mattered, but not as much as the truth finally having a public record. After the final hearing, Rowan came over with beer from the brewery. We sat on my back porch without speaking for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Do you feel different?" I looked at my yard, my house, my life. "The hardest part wasn't court," I said. "It was that first week, sitting in a shelter bed at 22 and realizing my own parents had thrown me away. That was when I decided no one would ever have that kind of power over me again. I still keep in touch with Aunt Rosalind. Rowan is still beside me. My cybersecurity firm has tripled in size. I am not angry anymore. I sleep well in a house that is mine, knowing every debt has been paid. They made me homeless for one night. I made sure the truth took everything they stole